oh, isn't it fun playing a flush draw? Because you never ever hit your damn flush draw? But sometimes you end up rivering a pair, and that's what we did here. But do we bet it? Do we check call it? Do we check fold? Let's talk about it. Good morning, how are we doing today? My name is James Sweeney, aka Split Suit, and today we're going to go through a hand played in a live 2-5 session. This was played at Harrah's Cherokee, and unfortunately they are very strict against vlogging, so I didn't get any real footage, but I did write the hand down super well, and let's go through it together. Alright, so in this hand we are in the big blind with 7-5 suited, folds around the cutoff bin raises off a $700 stack, the button calls off a half stack, and it folds to us. So this is a spot where we could consider a squeeze, but this is also just a super easy spot to call here and play it out, close action, and simply take a flop with it. Now, if you were to pull this up in the GTO Ranges app, you're going to notice that 7-5 suited is not a call in this situation. However, we have to keep in mind that the game tree in this solve is for a 4x open raise, not a min raise. So with the min raise here and closing action, calling here is totally acceptable. Then the only other information to note is my image was a little bit aggressive at this point. The cutoff was someone with a really excellent mustache and was pretty darn fishy throughout this session. Obviously, min raising preflop is a little bit atypical and might hint more towards fishy in a live game. And then the button is someone who just got their name called for a table change. So I don't know why the heck they're calling preflop, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Alright, so after calling, the flop comes out Jack 9 deuce rainbow with a backdoor diamond draw for us. We check, which I think is totally standard. The cutoff checks as well, which I wasn't expecting that to happen 100% of the time, and the button decides to fold and go for their table change. Again, not sure what the heck they were calling with preflop, but gotta love live poker. Now the turn is where things get interesting in my opinion, since it is an absolutely beautiful 9 of diamonds, giving us that backdoor flush draw, and I decide to fire this out for 20. So I think most people will agree that this is a pretty standard spot to bet. Your opponent didn't show much interest on the flop, they just decided to check, and you're in a situation where the board paired, so it didn't change things a tremendous amount, and you end up picking up some extra equity. Cool, so why not just fire? And of course at the end of the day you only have 7 high in this situation, so why not just bet? And 20 into 32 is totally acceptable. However, I think a lot of people bet here just because they have a flush draw and they don't really have any river plan, and that's what I want to talk about for a quick moment. So the cutoff is not the kind of player to check the flop with a jack, or even a 9, or any overpair, probably not even pocket 10s, or pocket 8s, or pocket 7s a decent chunk of the time. They are the kind of person that tends to fire if they have anything they deem as even sort of strong. So when they just decide to check, I'm expecting a lot of things like ace high, king high, maybe some queen high stuff, but we're talking about a lot of airy kind of stuff in the overall range. It's just the way that this player had been playing up to this point. And this is honestly kind of a common player type that you're going to run into in live cash, especially at 1-2, 1-3, and 2-5. And I say that to say this, let's look at our entire line right this moment. If we fire 20 bucks here and our opponent folds, fine. We get them to fold all of their equity, a lot of hands that honestly are ahead of us right this moment, and we end up winning the 32 uncontested. Sweet. If our opponent calls, I think they're calling with that largely stuck range of like ace high, king high kind of stuff, a decent chunk. Maybe they picked up some sort of backdoor draw, maybe they have a gut shot right this moment, but we're looking at a range that is largely like high card-ish right this moment. So because of that, and because we're trying to be proactive, I think we could break the possible river cards into roughly 3 different kinds of buckets. There are the buckets where we end up hitting our flush, and obviously those are pure value bets for us at the end of the day. Cool, easy plan. And then especially when we end up improving on one of those higher diamond cards like an ace or a king or a queen, those are going to be larger bets. You can already see how we're kind of taking this very proactive approach here, not just in terms of are we going to bet or not, but what would our sizing be on different kinds of river cards. And by the way, this is the way that my brain works in real time. It takes a lot of time and practice and off-table work to get there, but you can start thinking about this and being very proactive. And it may not be perfect, you may not have a plan for every single specific river card, but if you can have it for decent chunks or buckets, that's going to be very good in the long run. So okay, when we improve to a flush on the river, that's nice and easy, no problem. When the river breaks, which is going to happen a decent chunk at a time, what are we going to do? And my overall plan here is probably going to be to bet, and I'm probably going to overbet a decent chunk, especially on those higher river cards like an ace or a king or a queen. And the reason is that I think that if I bet something like 50 on the river, they're probably going to continue a good chunk of the time. Whereas if I bet for something like 150, which of course is roughly a 2x overbet, I think they actually will fold those kind of hands, being very scared that I have a 9. So again, notice that proactivity, not just in the specific card, but the overall sizing strategy, and of course why. Now, at first thought, you might be saying, is that balanced? And of course I would say, no, probably not the slightest. But when you're playing against these kind of players that don't think very deeply and honestly are going to be pretty face up and have massive elasticity points, it doesn't really matter if you're balanced. You're just taking advantage of areas in their game where they are weak, little strategic kinks they have, and as such you can take advantage and exploit them, and this is exactly how you can do it, having that proactive plan not just with the action but also with the specifics, especially of the size. So we've talked about 2 of the major 3 buckets already, the diamonds and also the bricks, but the other important bucket, because it is going to happen about 13% give or take on the river, is the pairs. And these are the interesting ones, if nothing else, because that's exactly what ends up happening after we bet the turn, get called, and on the river we end up pairing that 7. And the reason why these specific cards are so interesting when we river a 7 or we river a 5 is that given the range that we're assigning our opponent, right, thinking they have a lot of like stuck ace x or stuck king x or stuck queen x kind of hands, or possibly even weaker stuff that maybe they want to turn into a bluff later, this is a card where we just picked up a tremendous amount of showdown value. So that should change the plan a little bit, because what would a bet accomplish here, right? Even if we bet something like 40, what's our opponent going to do? Unless they're going to get really, really sticky with like ace x or king x kind of hands, this is one where it might actually make a lot more sense to just check the river instead, which is exactly what I did here. Since the bet wouldn't accomplish anything based upon the ranges and assessment that I had right that moment, and I thought that if I check, my opponent could make betting mistakes with things like king x or queen x kind of hands, I thought it made a lot more sense to put this into my check call range and feel very, very happy with pretty much any single river call that I decided to make. And my opponent tanked and thought and thought and thought, and unfortunately ended up chickening out and showed me his king 8. So ended up winning a little pot, which is fun, but I was really, really hoping Villain was going to pull that trigger and I could just snap it off and win a nice little bit of extra money in this spot. But if you're still here and you're like, okay, I understand that, but how the heck do I train my brain to actually do this kind of stuff in real time, to think about those kind of buckets, to create that kind of proactive thought process? This is exactly what my Postflop workbook is extremely useful for. Splitsuit.com/Postflop to learn more and essentially go through this workbook, do a few pages per day, and it's really going to help you start wrapping your head around the technical elements of the game. And I would definitely suggest focusing heavily on things like the runouts chapter, the hitting versus missing rivers, and also the river play when facing bets exercises will be extremely good for wrapping your head around it and creating a proactive and profitable plan for playing hands like this, whether you're in position, out of position, playing live, cash, online, or anything in between. This is going to be the perfect workbook for you. Again, splitsuit.com/Postflop to learn more and pick up your copy, or search for it on Amazon if you like paperbacks. And I wanted to drop one more gem, since I think it's something that a lot of people overlook, is always go back and think about what the opponent did the entire way through the hand. And the big thing I notice is the flop check, and also is that pre-flop sizing. Ended up noticing later in the session, as the session continued on, that this player would min raise with these kind of hands and use the 3, 4, or 5x open raise size with stronger hands. So keep that in mind when you're playing against players like this and you're trying to look at, okay, how do I get more information out of a single hand history that I played, or any bit of information that I pick up? This is a really, really big one. Looking for those sizing forks or those action forks is extremely helpful. So hopefully you can use that in your next session as well. And that is going to wrap it up for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to let me know. And remember, you can always join us on the Discord, redchippoker.com/Discord, to jump in, post your own hands, ask questions, and everything. Tons of great players over there that are willing to talk poker pretty much 24/7. Again, if you need anything, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you back shortly with a brand new video. In the meantime, good luck out there and happy grinding.